Jason, welcome back. Part 2.
It's always good to be back.
Good to be with you, man.
I think we should make it like part 3, 4, 5, and 6 so I can see it more.
Well, yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
Let's make it a series.
I already have a plan for 3
Yeah?
where I flip the script on you.
Okay, we can do that.
We'll see how it goes.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
So we left off, and our listener was eager to get to part 2. We've heard so many people say, where's the rest of the story? Where's the rest of the story? You have...
It's God's story.
It's God's story, 100%.
Or the rest of it is His story.
His story. His story in you.
I know I didn't say it right.
His story in you.
Yeah.
Because we left off with this incredible experience that you had while in prison, and you come out of this journey going in with, okay, I get the sentence. I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm going to prison, and I'm not coming out for a while.
Yeah, that's right.
And you come out, and a lot of folks don't know what happens when you get out of prison. I mean, what are some of the steps that take place? You get a parole officer.
Yeah.
And what can and can you not do?
Well, I mean, you're reporting to a parole officer I think it was every 2 weeks at first, then once a month.
What did it feel like? Let me step back.
Yeah.
What did it feel like when you...
It was no problem for me at all. Like, once I became a Christian, nothing fazed me anymore. Like, what else could happen to me other than death?
Yeah.
Right? And so having to see a parole officer was much better than being in prison.
Well, do you remember when you left the prison, like the day that you walked out? You see movies a lot, right? Where it shows getting your garment back, your jewelry, whatever it is, was in your pockets. I know it's not necessarily the case. And then you walk out and you're on the other side of incarceration.
So when you were in as long as I have, they don't have any of your belongings anymore. And actually, the way that I went in, they took my belongings from me and gave them to my family before I went into county jail to go through diagnostics. So they didn't have any of my old stuff. But I got a funny story. So I get my mom's there. She picks me up. I'm 20. I went in when I was 20, had my 21st birthday. So I've never had a legal drink in my life. I went to prison when I was 20, and 3 days later was my 21st birthday, or 4 days later, I mean. And then I got out 4 days before my 26th birthday. So anyway, my mom's there to pick me up. Now, my body hadn't moved 55 miles an hour, which is how fast a car goes, right? Back then, the speed limit was 55, right? In years. So my mom picks me up, and I'm like, I want to go to McDonald's. I just wanted to go to McDonald's and get some chicken.
Of course, yeah.
You know? So I get in the car, and my mom's not the greatest driver to begin with, but 55 miles an hour felt like 150 miles an hour. Like, it was pretty weird. I didn't expect to feel, my senses hadn't been moving for that speed in a long time. So that's one weird thing that I don't think people know about. If you don't drive in a car for years and then you get in a car and just do average speed.
How many years had gone by since you've been in a car?
5.
5 years, yeah.
And so exactly to the day, including leap year, which was very strange.
Yeah.
But
so you get your McDonald's.
Get my McDonald's. It wasn't half as good as I thought it was going to be, you know. But I was excited to be out and free, and I'd been anticipating it. So.
And what year was that?
That was 2000. It was 2000. May 3rd of 2000 is when I got out. So 24 and a half years ago.
So yeah, so you entered in the 90s. You left in a different century.
Well, when I went in, fax machines were a big deal. When I got out, the internet was here, you know?
Yeah.
Al Gore created it, right? So that was a trip. You know, I thought it was amazing how we could get a piece of paper to go from my office to your office. Yeah, pagers were out, but no paper was moving like that, you know, and that was amazing.
Yeah, even in 5 years, technology was changing rapidly already.
What, highways?
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't figure out how to get home. You know, like, if my mom had not taken me home, I would have never found my way home because the highways were so different in just a 5-year period. In fact, the road to my house was gone because the highways came in, wiped it out. We had to go all the way up through a hill now to get to our home. It was crazy. But yeah, a lot changes in 5 years, that's for sure.
So a lot of things are probably going through your mind. What are my next steps? What am I going to do? What's happened in the last 5 years? What's going through your mind?
Well, I think there's a lot of things that they try to prepare you for. Like I hadn't been able to turn a light switch off and on in 5 years either. So, cause the lights are automatic. Where they were back then, I don't know what they are now. And so I was going through my parents' home and never turning off the lights. I would turn them on apparently so I could see, but I would never turn them off. And so they prepared my parents for like, oh, he's going to do some weird stuff. You need to be prepared for it. And they said like nothing's going to be important to him because, when you're, fear for your life for 5 years and then you get out and you forget to feed the dog, who cares? That's not that big a deal, right?
Right.
And so the things that you have to reprogram your brain for. So sleeping was very difficult. So I slept on the floor for about a month because you're sleeping on a hard metal bed with a 2 or 3 inch pad. So sleeping in a really comfy bed, forget about it, man. I was like that.
It just felt weird.
Yeah. So that was strange. People were really weird. They weren't weird. I was the weird one, but I thought everyone knew I just got out, and nobody knew I just got out. And people would shake my hand and hug me. I hadn't been embraced until that one event where I encountered Christ. But girls were coming up to me. This was a big problem, right? So I'm like, in prison, you're working out all the time. You get out, you're ripped, So it was pretty interesting, that's for sure.
What about your dad?
So this was interesting. I think my dad was still on the fence about whether there was something different about me or not at this point. But he wanted me to get into the family business, and help me, which I was really impressed by. I think he realized that I was done playing games. He was devastated when I went to prison because he felt like I finally figured I was sober for a year before I went in. And so he felt like I had finally figured it out and I was going to get my act together. Then I had to go off to prison. And so he was anticipating me coming back and doing something, great. But
now, had you seen your dad? Did they visit you in prison?
My dad visited me, I want to say maybe 2 or 3 times.
So not much.
Not much. But my mother visited me every other weekend and brought my daughter up so that I could build a relationship with her the best I could. My mom was just phenomenal. Greatest woman on the planet.
So when you saw your dad for the first time on the other side of the bars, do you remember that?
The first time I saw him on the other side of the bars. Yeah, I was in Algo at the time and he came to the visiting room. But I don't really remember. It wasn't special.
Yeah.
It wasn't, we took a picture together and had it in my little photo album so I could remember it. But
so it's more like you're out, let's get moving here.
What can I do for my dad was a fixer like me and he wanted to help me. And so, immediately, pretty quickly, I would say within a month, I confronted him about our past because I felt like I needed to talk to him about why he did the things he did to me. Like when your hero, when you're a child and your hero beats you up like you're a full-grown man, it messes with you in a way that I can't really explain, but I just needed some answers. And so I remember we went to Steak and Shake because he loved smash burgers, which I love too. And I confronted him about all these things. And I'm like, Dad, why would you do that to your kid? And he cried.
Mm-hmm.
And he owned it all, even the stuff he didn't remember.
What was going on in your head during that time?
Well, I understood
that visit
grace in a way I had never understood it before at this point. So it was so easy for me to forgive him. I had already forgiven him because who am I to not forgive him after everything I put him through, as maybe a result of, the way he treated me. I don't know. My dad was not a victim to alcohol. I would never say that. He made those choices. But he didn't remember most of the things that I knew he didn't remember because he couldn't believe he was capable of doing some of those things. And the slate was clean after Steak and Shake, baby. And Dad and I's relationship ignited that day in a way that's I think in a way I would want everyone to experience their relationship with their father. I hope I emphasize that enough, because my relationship with him from there on out completely changed. The playing field was leveled, and he's like, all right, kid, let's see what you can do, because I'm an ex-con. It's not like someone's going to go hire me. So you're in the business now. And they told him, listen, don't make him do too many things right off the bat. So when I was at his house, I was sleeping there. I would walk around, I'd find stuff wrong with his house, and I'd fix it. So I built a big retaining wall he'd been neglecting for a long time. I painted his house. I fixed a couple of his cars, whatever he needed, whatever I walked around and saw that was needed done. And then he says, listen, I'd like for you to, come to work and get on the sales floor. I'm like, Dad, I've never drawn a house before, because all the salespeople had to learn how to sketch, He says, oh, I can teach you. That's easy. That piece of cake. You know what you have that I can't teach is the way to sell. You're a good sales guy. So he takes me out to the Lake St. Louis office. And, this is a business podcast, right? We can talk about
Absolutely, yeah.
Or whatever. Yeah. So my dad, he built houses on raw property within a 200-mile radius of his office. Well, he made a mistake and opened up an office within that 200-mile radius. So he doubled his overhead and didn't increase the amount of houses he was building, right? He didn't know that at the time. He thought he was trying to be more convenient for his customers that were farther west. So that office was on top of a bank. No one knew we existed. His main office was on Highway 55, and the drive-by traffic was crazy.
You couldn't miss it.
Yeah, the visibility. Oh, yeah, that's right. You've been there. So the visibility was fantastic. They didn't have to advertise or market or anything, but here we are in Lake St. Louis sitting on top of the bank, twiddling our thumbs, hoping someone walks in the door. And so my dad says to me, you need to set an appointment for every single day of the week. I'm like, okay, how do I do that? And he said, well, the lady you replaced, the salesperson you replaced, go through all of her files, call every single one of them and find out why they didn't buy a house and see if you can get them back in. She had like 20, 30 files. So I did that. I got 4 of those people in. And he says, now go to the white pages. Remember the white pages?
Oh, yeah.
And just pick a letter. So I picked W because my middle initial was W. And I just started calling people and said, hey, my name is Jason with Home Source Custom Homes. And have you ever considered building a custom home, or are you in the market to build? And they'd say no or hang up on me. Or I say, hey, did you know anybody that I could call that might be interested in our services? And so I booked an appointment for every single day for the next 3 months. So I was like, this is easy. I called a lot of people. Don't let me fool anyone. I probably called over 1,000 people to do that. But I didn't know how to do anything else, and he only gave me those instructions. So I just did what he told me. And so I sold my first house 2 weeks in. No salesperson had ever done that in the history of his company. He didn't tell me any of these things, right? And so there was just me and one other sales guy in that office. His name was Lou. And then we had, I think, 6 salespeople at the other office. So I'm just doing my thing. My dad hadn't taken me to a sales meeting yet to meet all the other people. I knew them, but we weren't in any meetings. My sister had held our sales meetings, I think, at the time. So I sold my first deal. Then I just started selling like a deal a week, was going pretty good. And I finally get invited to a sales meeting at the other office. And so I had sold more properties than all the other salespeople put together.
Wow.
And my dad couldn't wait to tell all the other salespeople how this had happened, right? So and he says to me, Jason, you proved what I've been telling these idiots for the last 5 years. And I'm like, oh, no. So I get there, and they all think my dad fed me these deals, And so all of a sudden I'm Bill's son, and, he's trying to help. My dad never fed me a single deal the entire time I was there. So standards got raised. Listen, if Jason's doing this, he just got out of prison. This guy has like no job history other than selling dope and washing dishes. And look at what he's doing,
Who'd have thought?
Who'd have thought? And it really just was a matter of listening to the master, right? My dad was the master. He had sales records that I never even got close to crushing or even meeting. Back then, you could buy a house for 40, 50 grand. It was pretty easy to sell 90 in a month, But, I think I don't know how many he sold in 1 month, but it was a lot. And so I'm on the sales floor. I'm selling houses. My dad taught me how to sketch, and I became a pretty good draftsman. I was able to see things, because I knew how to build them, because before I went to prison, I worked on our crews building houses, delivered lumber, so I knew kind of how things worked. So I had some experience that helped me with drafting, but I was able to take what people had in their brain and put it on a piece of paper to where they could, they knew I understood what they wanted. And so that's how it started, man. Now I'm this sales guy, and this office that they were going to close down in Lake St. Louis is now doing better business than the one it was. Yeah.
It's quite remarkable. It's remarkable that your dad took you in. It's a risk, taking your son, especially in your circumstance. He could have easily said, go get yourself a job. Your parole officer can find you something, I'm sure, bagging groceries or doing something like that, and figure it out on your own.
After the things I had done to his company, that's what he should have done, if you want to know the truth. I mean, I threw big, parties with live bands in his display homes, and they'd get trashed, people punching holes in walls, ripping doors off their hinges. And this was his business, where he would take people through and show them what type of a product he could build, I had no regard. I would max out his accounts at gas stations with fuel and beer and whatever else I could buy on these accounts. I mean, I was just reckless. I was the worst of the worst.
And this was before you went to prison.
Yeah. Right.
So he saw a change.
Oh, he did. And his was beautiful. My dad's like, how are you doing all this? And I got to give God all the glory, because I knew I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, washing dishes to the top sales guy in a firm like that, was only by the grace of God. There's no other explanation for the things I knew and were capable of pulling off, and the favor he gave me for my customers to help them, achieve what it is that they wanted, and the favor I got from my dad as these things were happening. One instance that I do want to mention, I asked my brother, there were some trust issues about what was going on around the office, and I just took my brother to lunch. I'm like, dude, what is going on? Like, what more do I have to do? I've been out now for 4 or 5 years, and things are going great, and, married now, and my youth pastor, and I'm, working as a sales guy. And my brother says to me, we're all just waiting for the old Jason to come back. Mm-hmm. That rocked me. I'm like, really? Like, I knew that guy wasn't coming back, but they didn't, and neither did anyone else that knew me, So
why wasn't he coming back? Well, how were you so confident of that, assured?
I am glad you asked that question. Yeah, because that guy died, and I don't know if people really understand what that means, and when you're born again, what that means, And so it sounds so weird. Yeah, I'm born again. What does that mean? In fact, Nicodemus says, how am I supposed to crawl up into my mother's womb a second time, right? It's not about that at all. It's the old man dies. I'm still a rebel. I hate the rules, but my heart's different. Yeah. And now I don't hurt people. The best definition of a criminal I ever heard, at least the one best definition for this criminal, me, was someone who solved problems without regard for others. And I created destruction everywhere I went, solving my own problems, regardless of how it impacted anybody else, right? I would lie, cheat, steal, whatever I had to do to fix whatever I needed. And because I never thought I was a criminal. I'm like, listen, I'm this nice guy, and if you judge me by my intentions, I was a nice guy, but that's not how the real world works. We get judged by our actions.
That's right.
And my actions proved me out to be a criminal.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that. I remember similarly, we share in just making poor decisions. And I remember I was a very unscrupulous young man. And I remember one of my buddies, unscrupulous. And years and years later, after I came to know Christ, he said, man, I want the old Nate back. I'm like, sorry, dude's dead.
Yeah, like you can't revive him.
Yeah.
There's no reviving of that guy. After you've experienced the beauty and the love and the truth behind God's plan for humanity, why would you ever go back to that crap? People that struggle with their faith grew up in the church. You know what I mean? Like, they're like, well, I'm not sure if I'm saved, blah, blah, blah. Oh, yeah, I don't ever question that. Sometimes I question God. which how dare I? But I never questioned my faith at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wish that other people, when I'm sharing the gospel with people, there doesn't seem to be that radical, I don't know, can't be manufactured, that's for sure. I've tried plenty of times.
It's a radical love. It's a radical love. It's the kind of radical love that God first loved us in, because it takes a radical kind of love to love your enemy. It takes a radical kind of love to love those who persecute you. It takes a radical kind of love to love those who hate you and despise you. And so many of us have been that to God. Yet, while we were still sinners,
He loved us. He sent His Son to die for us. So unworthy.
it's radical love. And it's the kind of radical love that unless we receive it, we really don't have it to give away. So that's the first step, is receiving the radical love.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think, when I look at surrender, because that's what it takes. Anyone listening here that's on the fence and doesn't know, you have to surrender all. And who better to surrender it to than the one who created you and everything else in this world? The creator of the world wants to be your friend. That's like my favorite thing. Let him. Will you just let him be your friend? I mean, come on. There is no better friend. There's no better father. There's no better, he's the all in all, and that's difficult to wrap your mind around. But surrender is really the key. So I know there's going to be people listening to this podcast that I know that have not gotten there yet, and they want to. They just don't understand what that means to completely surrender. And for me, it was super easy, because I looked at my life and I said, God, if you want this life, you can have it. It was nothing. I'm in prison. Look what I did with it. I remember saying that to him when I prayed. I'm like, if you want my life, you can have it. This sucks. Like, I did a terrible job, right? But I have friends who have had great lives and done great things, and they don't understand what that means. And they think they did it on their own too, which is a whole other problem. But surrender for me was easy. And those of you struggling with surrender, figure it out.
Yeah.
I mean, your life depends on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Surrender is this relinquishing of control, relinquishing of your own power. It's also relinquishing, I look at surrender as relinquishing of your own weapons formed against God.
We all have those. Yeah.
And so it's saying,
Some call it walls.
yeah, indeed. Yeah. It shows up in different ways. And that step is a step toward God. In a sense, you're either walking toward God or away from God. It's either your back's toward Him or your face is. It's a choice. And for me, like you, I was on a one-way road to nowhere, darkness.
Nowhere. Isn't that a real word for us? There was nothing. We drove down.
Yeah,
Till we ran out of
you
gas.
keep rolling. Like, where am I going? This is not going anywhere good. And to your point about, you say, well, someone listening is like, well, my life's pretty good. Like, I wasn't in prison. I wasn't facing a sentence. I wasn't, I got a pretty good life.
I never hurt anybody, not intentionally, right? It could be lots of things, sure.
Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, that's great. Congratulations. That's fantastic. And like you said, there's a lot to unpack even in that we don't have, that maybe part 3 we can cover that.
It's just the truth. No, it's good. Not one person is good. You are not good. If you're listening today and you think you're good, I'm sorry. Spoiler alert, you are not. Nor can you be.
Yeah, because when we look at good, we look at it as the mark or the standard is us, right? You can say, oh, I'm better than that guy. Someone listening is like, oh, I'm better than Jason and Nate were when they were young and wayward. Well, we're not the standard.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good. I remember my daughter saying to me, Dad, my friends think I'm like an angel. I said, I know, because they're the devil. I'm just teasing. Anyway, my daughter was trying to say, Dad, I'm a good kid.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to tell her, you're not good. You can't be good. And those kids aren't the standard. He is. And none of us can live up to that.
And this is where when you're talking about your brother and everyone waiting for the old Jason to come back, and that the standard had changed dramatically for you in your life. The standard was no longer, hey, my buddies are all doing it, so I'm going to do it too, to now I have such a high standard in my sanctification, my change, my growth, the way that I'm a new person. I'm a new person. And that new person doesn't ever have to be. I don't ever have to go back to that, nor do I ever want to go back to that.
Why would we?
The new me is too good.
It's sweeter. It's everything too good. And like, I want to think of a better word than it's too good. It's so sweet. My life, I didn't know it could be like this. I didn't know it existed. I think I always felt like other people had it. Like, oh, that person looks happy or whatever. I want to be like them, the old happiness quest that led me to Jesus.
Right.
But yeah, it's just not real.
So you're working with Dad. You're married now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. How'd that happen?
That was really weird. So I was at a Bible study called BSF, and I met this girl. Her name was Leanne, and I said, "Hey, let's go out to dinner after Bible study."
Were you buff at the time still, or did you lose some of it by then?
No, I was still
pretty buff.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was running 7 miles a day.
Oh yeah.
I was pretty. I wasn't lifting weights anymore because I really hated that. But anyway, so we met, and she was quite a bit younger than me. I found out, and I was like, "Oh, what a bummer," because she's smoking hot. And she's at a Bible study, so she probably loves Jesus, so I need to explore.
I mean, how much younger? Like not
7 years.
Oh, 7 years. How old were you?
I was 27.
Okay, so 20.
No, I was 26,
Okay.
and she was
19. Okay,
yeah.
All right.
Which became very evident when we went to a pool hall and they wouldn't let her in.
Oh,
I was like, oh my gosh, I'm dating a baby. No, I'm teasing. But here's the funny part. So I met her and her friend, and we went out to dinner with a group of people, and we just started talking and, really hit it off. Well, she goes home and tells her sister, hey, there's this guy at BSF. You've got to meet him. And so I hadn't met her sister yet or whatever. But so she fixes me up with her sister because she had a boyfriend, right? And I was like, okay. So I started hanging out with her sister. Just loved her sister. Tracy is just the sweetest one of the kindest people I've ever met in my entire life. But there just wasn't the intimate connection or whatever. Love her dearly. I have zero bad to say about her because I think she's a really good example of a godly woman, but just weren't connecting on a romantic level. And so one day I called Tracy up and I said, hey, we need a weekend receptionist. And she was a school teacher and it was the summertime. So I thought, oh, she could use some extra money and we need somebody to answer the phones. So I called her up and she says, no, I'm not really interested, but my sister's in town and she might be interested. And I didn't know, I remembered her sister. So anyway, Leanne comes in and interviews. My dad hires her and she's the weekend receptionist. So anyway, we, how this story, if she tells it, it's going to be a little bit different, but I'm going to
we're going to have her on the show.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
She'd love it.
Yeah.
I'm sure. But so I'm going to tell the truth about the story, and then she'll tell you her version. Because I know the truth, because it was my story. So anyway, my buddies and I were going to a Michael W. Smith concert, and one of my buddies bailed, so I had an extra ticket. I'm like, hey, you want to go? She's like, ooh, this guy's asking me out on a date or whatever. And I was just being nice and friendly, although I was very excited.
You were interested.
I was definitely interested. So we go on the Michael W. Smith concert. Afterwards, we go over to a friend of mine's house. He just got out of the police academy, and he was praying that God would place him as a police officer in St. Louis County. And as soon as I heard her pray, I knew she was going to be my wife.
Wow.
I knew it. So I went home and I dropped her off. I went home. I called my best buds, Jeff and John, the J crew, right? And I'm like, dude, I'm going to marry this girl. They're like, you're crazy. Shut up. Jeff hangs up on me. John's like, Jason, you don't even know this girl. I'm like, listen, I'm telling you, she's going to be my wife. I am 100% certain about this, John. I've never been more certain about anything in my whole life. Like, I'm convinced this is my wife. He's like, whatever, dude. You might not ever see her again. Well, she's my weekend receptionist. I see her every weekend. So I brought flowers to her house and left them on the front door with a card saying, "Hey, had a great time. Hopefully we can do it again sometime." And so I found this out later, but she called her sister after that night and said, "I think I'm going to marry this guy."
No way.
Yes. So I'm telling my friend, pleading with my friends, while we're in this joy with me, friends, right? They're like, "You're an idiot." And then she calls her sister up and she's like, "Really? That's amazing." Her sister totally believes that. I think it's a good thing. And so 2 weeks later, there was some other fun stories between there. But I said, "I can't hold it in anymore. I'm in love with you and I want to marry you." And she said, "Are you serious?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Me too." I couldn't believe it. So I called John and Jeff. I'm like, "Oh, yeah." She wants to marry me too. Now what, right? So anyway, we dated for 2 weeks, got engaged, and we were married 2 months later.
Wow.
Been together now 22 years.
Wow. What a story.
Yeah. So, people say love at first sight. It wasn't for me. I thought she was attractive.
Yeah.
But when I heard her pray, her spirit spoke to my spirit in a way that I had not experienced ever in my life. And that's how I knew. I was just certain. And you couldn't convince me otherwise, Now, I guess I would have been convinced if she just said no, right, or whatever. But, that feeling, I could feel it today just talking about it. It was just something, I've never felt it again, ever in my whole life, So, love at first sight is real, kind of.
Yeah.
So
22 years.
22 years, man.
And she's still putting up with you.
Barely.
No, she loves you dearly. You and I have been friends for a long time, and I see the way you look at each other, and it's still that fire of love. Yeah.
I'm a lucky dude.
Yeah.
And here's the beauty. I did nothing to deserve this. This is how great my God is, right? This is how it's just how he takes care of me.
Yeah.
He lavishes me with things that overwhelm me, so I can't talk about it. It's like I need to talk about it more.
Yeah.
But
because it's his story in you.
Oh, man. I think my whole life was in a 4x8 cell for 5 years. And that's what I did on my own without him, And then to see where I am today, the freedom I have because of him, the blessings I have because of him, the relationships I have because of him, it's all because of him, I like to take credit for it sometimes, and I have to watch myself, right? Like, look at me, I'm this awesome sales guy. Well, you a favor. You're not awesome at all. He is,
The only thing that we can take credit for, and we have to be very trepidatious about it, is the response of obedience. And I think we need to be mindful and attentive about that, because your response of obedience was the only response. And it was the only response that you could have gotten, because you knew in the depth of your spirit where the other way took you.
Oh yeah. I knew the dead end road. I'd been living there for a couple of years. I got to the dead end and I was like, okay, I guess I've arrived. Well, this sucks, But I'd been there for so long and it was miserable. I was trying to turn the car around, but I drove it so far I was out of gas. And I just had to turn around and start walking, and eventually started to see light again.
Well, yeah. I mean, here's what happened. You started walking, and guess who you encountered on the way?
It's like the Damascus Road.
That's right. You met Jesus.
I really did.
And he started walking with you. And he walked you to this day today, and there's so much more to come. Another cliffhanger, because we got to have a part 3. Because there's more to the story.
Yeah, what God's done in my life, not just after I got out, not just after I got married, but daily, is tremendous.
Can't
wait to share it.
Can't wait. Thanks for being here.